Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Security Best Practices for Regular Users. Before we get started, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items and let you know how you can participate in today's session. Ultimately, we want to hear from you. So in addition to asking a few audience polls, we encourage everyone to submit your questions via the Ask a Question button throughout the presentation today. Our presenter will answer as many questions as time permits at the end of today's session. If you experience any audio issues during the session, please click on the Rate This button on top of your player window and follow the instructions to receive help. And just a friendly reminder that this event will be available on demand just a few minutes after the session ends, and we'll send around that recording. We'll also send the slides to everyone who is in attendance after the session. We'd also like to invite you to follow our channel to view any upcoming events and on-demand content we have after today's session. And with that, Roman, it's off to you.
Thank you. Today we're going to talk about security best practices for regular users. So I'm going to try to make this a little bit more interactive, and I wonder if you can, in the Ask a Question button, I wonder if you can tell me, who do you think regular users are? Just hit the Ask a Question button and sort of hit what you, let me know what you think. Okay, all right, so I guess a couple of people think that regular users is basically anybody who is not a security expert, and that's kind of what I'm referring to. Yeah, I mean regular users are basically anybody who uses the internet or any digital equipment, electronic equipment, that's connected to the internet or maybe not connected to the internet, but they don't necessarily have any specific security expertise. And obviously these people are definitely at high risk of having their data compromised or having their identity stolen or other bad things happening to them. And most of them don't really know many security best practices and how to protect themselves. And this is what we are going to talk about today. Yep, exactly. All right. So about me. My name is Roman Garber. I am a cybersecurity coach. I'm a manager. I've been in the security industry for 15 plus years. I've been in technology for 20 plus years at various roles. But the point here is that my real drive and goal is to make the world a more secure place. A bit maybe ambitious, but that's sort of that's really me. All right, so about secure innovation, who we are. So we really are an authority in software security with over 15 years research and software vulnerabilities. We have really amazing security testing methodologies adapted by large companies. We authored over 18 books, and overall we have really, really amazing talent, and I'm really fortunate to work with such amazing people that know so much and help our customers get better in security. All right, so why this talk? Well, obviously it's October, it's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so that's one of the reasons. But really, as a cybersecurity professional, I really strive to make people's data secure, and it truly bothers me a lot that the regular users, like we described, are really the ones that are bearing the cost of data breaches, such as Equifax, for example. And if you know somebody or ever, if you ever knew somebody who had their identity stolen, and just by the way, in the questions, just say yes or okay if you actually know somebody who had their identity stolen or heard of somebody who had their identity stolen. And if you do, then you really know how much time and effort it takes to get your identity back, right? How much stress, how much wasted phone calls and wasted time, and something that you really didn't plan on to take care, your life, your next couple of months through. That's it really is pretty bad. And while these large corporations, then when they experience a security breach, while they may get a fine or they may, get their hands slapped or their stock price dips for a couple of months maybe, then slowly climbs back up. Yeah, that's a monetary value, that's true, but there's no really way to put a monetary value on the stress that identity theft or any matter, any security breach, or like, ransomware or of private data, private information of regular users. You cannot really put a price tag on that stress, on that headache that it causes people, and that really bothers me, right? So that's another reason why this talk. And really, often very small adjustments in user behavior have a really, really large impact on the security of users. So we'll talk about that today. So what are we gonna talk about? Yeah, I'm gonna, this is what we'll talk about. We'll talk about the basics of online security and a little bit more beyond the basics of online security. We'll talk about using password managers, safe texting, browsing. We'll talk about free Wi-Fi in your McDonald's or in your hotel or an airport. We'll talk about two-factor authentication. It's just a buzzword that you probably hear more often these days, but it actually has been around for, I don't know, as long as I remember being in security. We're going to talk about locking and encrypting, backing up your devices, and we're going to talk a little bit about security on social media. So with that, let's talk about the basics. And a little bit beyond. So, first, we have the basics, right? And that you probably all have seen, especially being October Awareness Month, you all have seen that on posters everywhere or kind of emails you get and all that stuff, and talks about picking a secure password, not opening emails from people you don't know, don't clicking on links, and all that stuff we hear over and over and over again. But really, we can go a little bit beyond that, and all those are all excellent and good practices. But I think that these are just not enough, right? We can talk about protecting your data and the privacy online, right? And it truly can be a lot of effort. And I know this because as a professional, I try to do it all the time, right? I try to protect my data, I try to protect my privacy online, and I feel like I'm always swimming upstream. It's just so hard. There's all these free tools, there's free services where the product, if they're free, the product is really you, right? Or actually your data, right? They want to collect your data, analyze your data, know your buying habits, know kind of what you like, what you don't like, so they can serve you targeted advertising, so they can serve you advertise better products to you, or they can maybe pitch a certain political agenda to you, or kind of any of that stuff. That's really all boils down to that, and it's really hard for a regular user to stay away from these free services, right? There's also unsafe and insecure defaults that a lot of these services have. For example, like what Facebook knows about you, and Facebook's been a lot in headlines these days, but what Facebook knows about you, well, Facebook doesn't even really know. Like they just admitted recently, it's hard for them to know what they know about you. Even if you don't have a Facebook account, there's something called the shadow profile on people that don't have a Facebook account. There's also fitness trackers, right, that show your location. And if you don't configure them well or secure enough with non-default settings, then they might show things where you are, and it might be okay for you. But if you're in the military base, on a secret military base, especially somewhere, that's a bit of an issue. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And talking about it being hard, have you tried to live without Google? If you if you tried and succeeded, please say yes in the questions. I've tried. I joke that I sold my soul to Google 10 or so years ago when I bought my first Android phone. And ever since then, I've been trying to buy it back or grab it back somehow, and it's really hard, right? I've tried living without Google for a bit, and it's just really impossible, right? It's everywhere. And then like you have these random websites that you sign up for. I mean, not even talking about Google, just like some random pop-up website that you happen to browse on, and you happen to click on some information, and they want you to sign up, and you sign up, and you give out all these information. Then there's all these phishing emails. There's always malware and ransomware and spam, and it's really hard, right? That's the bottom line. So the question is, now that I kind of told you all this, and you may be going, oh my God, this is bad. So how paranoid should I be? And the answer is that it really depends on your personal threat model. What's a really, and the personal threat model, we'll talk about threat model in a second, but your personal threat model depends on your lifestyle. I mean, you may choose to go live in a cave, right? And and it's totally fine. There are people living in caves, just outside of Granada, Spain, and they probably, some of them have some electricity, some of them don't even have electricity, and they're doing pretty well. But it's a trade-off here, right? It's a trade-off between usability and security. So if you don't really want to live in a cave, then you kind of have to have this trade-off, and that's where your personal threat model comes in. And your personal threat model will depend on who you are. Like if you're a criminal and you're doing, I don't know, something not totally legal, then your threat model might be somewhat different than if you are a regular user, right? But don't fall into the trap of thinking, I do nothing wrong, so therefore I got nothing to hide. That's a trap, really. Just because your lifestyle choices are acceptable today, it doesn't really mean that they will always be and universally accepted, right? Just for example, using marijuana might be perfectly acceptable in Washington State, but even having traces of it in your bloodstream may carry death penalty in Singapore, right? So imagine going to Washington and then going to Singapore, right? You're risking something here. But even if you've never done anything wrong, and even if you never broke the law, and I mean to a point where you never jaywalked, right? You never discussed a controversial topic or voiced your non-mainstream opinion, right? There are probably still some things from your past that you may not want certain people to know. Like maybe those pictures from that college party is not something you want your current boss to see. Or the other way around. Perhaps you're working on a really, really important project at work, and you are, you're dealing with a bunch of confidential data, and if that leaks somewhere, it may tip off your competition, and it may actually ruin the project. It may actually lead to the downfall of your company, right? All of that feeds into your personal threat model. So let's talk about the threat model. What really is a threat model? It's really it by no means is an exhaustive list, right, of things that you need to look at. But really what it boils down to is to identify and quantify your weaknesses so you can come up with appropriate defenses. So I like to think about threat modeling from a physical sense that kind of everybody would understand. So if you have your house, right, or your apartment, or wherever or your cave, right, wherever you live, you there's a certain threat to the property that you have, right? There's certain assets that you're trying to protect there, and you have to kind of identify your assets, right? So you might have certain assets, right, in your house, and you can think of, so if I was a burglar, how would I break into my own house, and what would I be looking for, and how would I how would I get those assets, right? So really the threat to these assets here is somebody can burglarize your house. Somebody can follow you to your home and forcefully enter behind as you opening the door, and can assault you and take assets that way. So these are all threats to those assets, right? And then you kind of have to look at the likelihood of these threats being materializing, right? So perhaps you live in a very, very safe neighborhood. Perhaps the town you live in had 0% crime for the past 20 years. So in that case, chances are of your house being burglarized is fairly low. Right? Or you may be like me. You may live in New York, right? Although New York has gotten really a lot safer these days. But, I wouldn't consider leaving my house and not locking the door, for example. So then you look at what measures can you take to mitigate those risks, right? For example, I lock my door. I lock my windows. I make sure that I kind of put on the burglar's hat, and I say, well, if I was the burglar, how would I get in my house? Maybe I'll try the back door. Maybe I'll try the windows. Maybe I'll try, I don't know, to go through the roof or something. So I kind of look at my house, and I make sure that I mitigate these threats. I lock the windows. I lock the doors. I may have an alarm system. Same thing goes for your digital data, right? And you have to kind of understand which assets you have that are that are digital, and that's kind of that's worth protecting, right? So it could be and this is not an exhaustive list, right? So it could be your personal information like name, date of birth, your spouse's name, your children, your parents. Fairly important, right? This can be, we'll talk in a minute what can this be used for. Or maybe your personal pictures, your videos, your documents, that picture from that college party. Or maybe your kind of important documents, your birth certificate. Perhaps it's financial information, right? There's banks, there's loan, there's credit. There's some such thing as your location, where you are, right? Or where do you frequent? Where do you work? How often do you stay outside your house? Where are you on? When are you on vacation? And maybe that's fairly important to a burglar, for example, right? That when you're on vacation. Your things like social media accounts and what data you post there, those are really pretty important digital assets. Things like physical devices, right? Where are they? Where's your phone? Where's your the latest IoT device? How's your latest Amazon Echo, whatever other devices similar to that are? What are they doing? Business assets on your personal devices, right, or on your corporate devices. Important documents that are on your phone, your email that goes to your phone, right? All these are your digital assets. Communication, like your conversations, your emails, your text messages, your chat, your phone calls. These are all your digital assets, and also data about data, right? We call it metadata. When did you call? Who did you text? You'll be surprised, but you can derive a lot of information, a lot of good information, or maybe not so good information about what you do in your daily life or in your professional life based on who you call, who you text. For example, if you are CEO of a big corporation and all of a sudden you're calling a mergers and acquisition firm fairly often, well, guess what? I might kind of deduce that there might be some merger or acquisition going on with your firm. Or if you are a small company and you are calling bankruptcy lawyers, might know there's something going on there too, right? So that's all kind of metadata. Going back to sort of what are the threats to these types of assets? Just taking a few of them for example. So your obviously your personal information can lead to identity theft, and we talked about identity theft. But also things like your location, right? if you happen to be on the military base and you happen to be in the military forces, there was just recently, or fairly recently, there was a fitness tracker company that basically they said, well, we were going to disclose anonymized data of everybody and where they run, right? I mean, doesn't seem pretty bad, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It's anonymized. It's just wherever everybody runs, right? People run at Central Park. People run on on the pier, whatever they run. Well, it turns out that an Australian researcher looked at it and says, why are people running in the middle of a desert? Why are people running in the middle of in the middle of nowhere? And what happened was that they disclosed. They disclosed. It turns out they disclosed locations of secret military bases, right? Because that makes sense, right? If you're running in the middle of a dense forest, chances are it's not a dense forest, and you're running a certain pattern. Chances are you're a military personnel on the secret base, right? So that's really that. Kind of it has to be important. What assets and think about the threats, right? Think about what's going on there, what can happen. And obviously you can think about measures that you can take to mitigate those threats. Cool. All right, let's go on. I think we talked about threat model for a bit. Let's talk about using a password manager. I'm going to pull a poll here. How many of you are actually using a password manager? And just by, this is going to be for the next minute or so. Just let me know how many of you use a password manager. So while you're polling, let's talk about what is a password manager, right? So really a password manager is an electronic notebook, if you will, that you keep with all your accounts and their corresponding passwords. And, you have that, and you protect that that list of accounts and passwords with a single password, right? And on one hand, it's a very convenient tool, right? I use a password manager. It's called Password Safe. And I personally like it. There's a bunch of other password managers out there. Not many people actually are using password managers here. All right. So let's. I guess nobody's using password manager, at least according to these poll results. So so it's a list of all your accounts and all your passwords, and you only need to remember one password. So it's fairly convenient, right? It's really you remember one password, and that's it, right? You make it a good one. Make it a really good one, right? My password is 24 characters long and it's random. Don't use a password when you use a password manager. Don't use a password like, a simple password, right? Because then you're really jeopardizing all of your passwords. It's a good idea to use a phrase, right? But the phrase that's meaningful to you, but not to anybody else. Don't use a phrase like to be or not to be. That is the question, right? Because that is a really bad password. Use a good one, make it 12, 16 characters, make it meaningful to you, and save all your passwords in the password manager. Now, why? You may say, why do you want to do this? Why bother? Outside the convenience factor, right? I mean, it autofills forms, it generates passwords by itself, all that cool stuff, but why bother? So really the reason is that you have accounts get compromised, right? If you looked at LinkedIn, if you looked at Yahoo, if you looked at other recent breaches, accounts get compromised. And what you do when you have too many passwords and too many accounts is that you start to use the same password for all your accounts, right? Because it's really hard to remember a good password for a single account. Or you use very simple passwords, right? Password 123. I think the most commonly used password is 1234567, right? And when you use a really, really simple password, or what happens is when you use a really, really simple password is it becomes very, very easy for criminals to crack that password. And if it's really to crack that password, it means it becomes really, really easy to compromise your account. So if you are if you're not using a strong password for any account, your banking account, or even some random website account, even if you're not using a strong password there, it's very easy to compromise your account and access that website as you. If you are using a strong password, it makes it hard for somebody to crack that password and compromise the account, but it makes it difficult for you to remember. Right? It's hard to remember so many strong passwords. So either you're going to reuse the password, or you can use a simple password. If you're going to reuse the password, then what happens is that once your credentials get stolen on one site like Yahoo, and through some effort, criminals actually find what your password is, they can then try that password on other sites like the banking site. And if you're using the password, it's they're into your banking site. So using a password manager really solves those issues, right? It allows you to have a strong password for every site, and you don't really need to remember them. There's a great website called Have I Been Pawned, and it lists all the security breaches, or not all, but at least the one that they know of. They have a lot of them. What you can do is you can enter your email address, and it will search the database of all the security breaches, and it will tell you if your email address has been, and your password had been compromised through one of those security breaches, and it'll tell you which ones it's been compromised. I know my email address has been compromised at least 3 times in Adobe breach, in LinkedIn breach, and I think in the Yahoo breach as well, right? So because I have a strong password, and because I've changed my password since, I'm not really worried about those passwords being cracked. But if you had a password there of 1234567 and you used it on your banking site and your LinkedIn account, chances are you should change the password on at least on your banking account. All right, cool. So that's the password manager. Let's talk about safe texting and safe browsing. Now, there's a couple of things about doing safe texting and safe browsing, right? So there's updating your software, and it's really important, right? It's still all those annoying update me notifications, and you can ignore them at your risk. But the truth of the matter is that 90% of successful attacks exploit unpatched software. Equifax, remember, they got breached because they did not patch their software on time. And it's not like on time, like tomorrow after the breach came out. It took them a really long while to patch their software, and which they didn't. And it caused this pretty bad breach. So patch your software. That's the bottom line, right? And then what about actually safe texting and safe browsing? So there's a thing called about message preview, right? If you all seen it, you click on an email, it renders the email right on the side. What happens is that during the message preview, any code that email or that message contains actually gets executed, and sometimes you may get a malicious email and you don't really want to open it, but you just click on it because you kind of, go using your arrow keys or just accidentally click on it with the mouse, and it loads up in the preview. And if there's any malicious code on it, and if your systems aren't patched, or if there's a really new vulnerability, well, guess what happened? Right, so very simple thing: disable the message preview. Right, don't use it, and it'll save you a lot of trouble. There's also something called private browsing, and I'm sure you've seen it. There's incognito mode in Chrome. It's called private browsing in Firefox. What happens is that your browsers actually store information about you and the site you interact with. There's also third-party sites that track your behavior, and some of it is done is obviously for your convenience. Some of it is done to serve you relevant advertising. based on your behavior. But thing is, if you use private browsing, all that is disabled. Or I shouldn't say all of it. I mean, you can still be tracked, but at least a lot of it is disabled, right? At least your browser is not going to store your history, or your browser is not going to store your banking site, right, or anything like that. So use private browsing for anything that you don't want your browser to remember, right? Even though it might be convenient, a little extra effort, and you are a lot more secure, right? Use your private browsing for any shared device, right? So let's say you're giving your friend your phone and say, hey, can you look this up for me? Or, your friend says, oh, you have your phone, I need to Google something. Open up a private browser for them, and they'll Google it in the private browser, right? That's that. We talked about location services, right? Where you are. It's pretty important. It might not be important right now. You might not feel like it's really important, but definitely location is one of those things that seems trivial, but it actually is very important to criminals, right? We talked about, if you're on vacation, for example, right? It's pretty, and I want to rob your house. Well, guess what? Guess where when I'm doing this, right? Yeah, so that's that. Let's talk about free Wi-Fi. It's a very convenient thing, right? You go to a hotel or an airport and you find some free Wi-Fi, and it's nice, right? But free Wi-Fi really comes at a cost, right? There's the evil twin attack, really. What happens is, if you're staying in Hilton, I'm gonna use a Wi-Fi device, and I'm going to advertise slightly modified Hilton SSID, and they'll have a 1 instead of an L in there. You will not notice it. You when you're looking for Wi-Fi, when you have to get that important document out, and your boss is really asking for it, you will double click on it, and you will connect to my Hilton Wi-Fi. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called a man-in-the-middle attack, right? I'm going to actually monitor all the traffic, because now I am in the path between you and whatever you're communicating with, and I'm going to monitor the traffic, and I'm going to try to steal your credentials, try to steal your session. There is the Fire Sheep, which is an automated cooking stealing application, I guess, a little piece of malware, that it will take once you connect to a website, it will take your cookie, it will basically steal your session, and then it will allow me to, as an attacker, to log in as you or access this website as you and pretend that it's really you who's accessing that site. So if you're accessing a New York Times website, well, maybe it's not that important, but if you're accessing a banking website, and I can access now your banking website, and I can transfer some money from your banking site from your bank to my bank. That might actually be important. Some of the countermeasures you can use, right? If you have to use the free Wi-Fi, use an encrypted session, HTTPS, or even better, use a VPN. Avoid public Wi-Fi for doing important things, or anytime your important information is exchanged, right? As I mentioned, if you're reading the news, maybe not that important. If you're doing shopping or banking, don't use public Wi-Fi for that. Turn off automatic Wi-Fi completely on your phone. What happens is your phone constantly goes and advertises all the networks that it knows about. And it says, is this network around? Is this network around? Can I connect to this network? Can I connect to this network? And actually, as crooks, I can pretend to be a network that you know. So if you ever connected to an AT&T network or to a Starbucks network, and now you go walking around and your phone says, "There's Starbucks network here, Starbucks network here," I'm gonna turn on my Wi-Fi router or my Wi-Fi access point, and I'm gonna call it Starbucks. And guess what your phone is gonna do? It's gonna automatically connect to it. So turn it off, right? Buy an unlimited data plan, right? Buy an unlimited data plan. These are fairly cheap these days, and stop using public Wi-Fi altogether. If you can avoid using public Wi-Fi, don't use public Wi-Fi. And implement two-factor authentication when logging into sensitive sites. And we'll talk about two-factor authentication next. So what is two-factor authentication? So really, two-factor authentication is a fancy word for saying that you are not using just the password to authenticate, but you're also using something else. And two-factor means, generally it means something you know, like your password, and something you have, like a token or a key fob or a phone or something other. So a physical thing that you actually have. And you need both of them, right? You need to have both of them in order to authenticate. So now, even if a password gets compromised, and even if your password gets stolen, and people and criminals can actually, get to your banking site with your password, they will be stopped by this second factor, right? Because they do not have your phone, because they do not have that key fob, they do not have that physical second factor. And they cannot access your site, and it's really easy to turn on, right? It really avoids single point of failure, and it's not necessary for all sites, right? You don't want to use two-factor authentication again for reading the news because it's not that necessary. Now, if you're a reporter and you are uploading the news to some facility where your story is going to be broadcasted, you probably want to use two-factor authentication, right? Because that's important. If you're going to a banking site, you want to use two-factor authentication, right? So really, that's that. I cannot stress this enough, right? If you're just using a password, great. If it's a strong password, great. If you're using a password manager, awesome. But just as another step, use a second factor. After all, I mean, if you're locking your door when you're leaving your house, you're going to, if you're going on vacation, perhaps you have two locks, right? Perhaps you're going to lock both of them, and that's just going to be, your second factor, right? So that's that. Second factor is it can be also something you are. So not necessarily something you have, but also something you are. And something you are is things like your biometrics, right? It could be your fingerprint. So your password and your fingerprint. That's also two-factor, right? Or your iris scan. You've seen movies, right? People typing in the password and sending in with their iris scans, right? So that's that's all two-factor. Use two-factor as much as possible. It may seem as nuisance, but it really is awesome. Now, not all the sites support two-factor authentication. There's a great website called twofactorauth.org, which shows you all the sites that support two-factor. And, it allows you to tweet to your banks to, tell them to support two-factor. And if your bank for some reason doesn't support two-factor. Now, I mean, I'm pretty sure that most banks now support at least some form of two-factor. At least maybe when you log in from an unknown browser or something, your bank will text you or call you back and ask you to put in a PIN code or something like that. And then it actually might remember that in your browser. And next time you go to the banking site, it will not ask you for your second factor. But actually, the only reason it doesn't ask you is because it already remembers it in the browser. If you use the private mode, for example, in your browser, it will ask you constantly. It will, like I do it all the time. When I go to my bank, I use a private mode in my browser. It always asks me for my second factor. So this is a very convenient site to see which site supports two-factor authentication. You can search for it. It's pretty cool site, actually. I like it. But if your bank does not support two-factor authentication today, maybe it's time to change your bank. All right. Let's talk about locking and encrypting and backing up your devices, right? So what I do when I send email is I encrypt and I sign every message. Now it's not, it's not really trivial, right? You have to set it up, but what happens is that the recipient knows that I am really the sender, right? Nobody spoofed that message. I am the sender of the message, and even if it's stolen, even if somebody reads that message, the integrity of that message is protected, right? Because it's all encrypted. It's gibberish to somebody who cannot decrypt it, right? Now, there are threats to your communication, right? For example, if you lose a device, all data can be compromised, right? So if you're not encrypting your phone and you lose it, and you have this important document from work, it's compromised. If you have, if so, really, there's only one thing to do here, right? And it's to use your defenses, and really to use defenses is to encrypt your devices. So most phones can be really easily encrypted, and you can use a local backup. You can use an online backup. If you use an online backup, encrypt it. Use full disk encryption, right? And use end task lost my device, right? If you lose your device, you can always go and both on Google and on iTunes, you can say I lost my device, and it'll tell you where it is, and it'll offer you to wipe it, right? And if you can wipe it, that means that your device, all data on your device is lost and it's gone. So it means that if I stole your device, I cannot actually use the data. I cannot get that important document or those pictures from that party, and I cannot use that, right? I wanted to add a little bit about WhatsApp, right? Because a lot of people use WhatsApp and they think it's encrypted communication and it's end-to-end encrypted, and it's awesome. It really is. It really is end-to-end encrypted. But what happens is if you back up your chat messages to Google, like it sometimes asks you, those backups are not encrypted, right? And this is actually what an issue I have with WhatsApp, right? Because if you're encrypting something and you are protecting something in some place, but somewhere else it is not encrypted, well, all of that protection is really gone, right? You're only as strong as your weakest link. So if I'm texting through WhatsApp with my lawyer, and it's a really important kind of communication, and my lawyer backs up all these chats to Google, well, all of that encrypted information is now stored in clear text on Google, right? So kind of really important point here is that not only you need to protect your data, but also the people you're communicating need to protect your data. And, this sort of segues into social media and how you post on social media, right? If you're, we talked about, the party pictures and all that other stuff, and the fact that pictures on Snapchat don't really disappear. Snapchat still has them. Nobody, they disappear from your friends' phones, but they don't really, because, well, I can take a picture with another phone, right? While that Snapchat is open. That's just a really easy attack, right? But when you post something on social media, that's one thing. But when your friends post something on social media about you, they're effectively become part of your threat model, right? Because if your friends tag you in a certain in a certain picture, in a certain post, or your communication with your friends is compromised because your friends are not using secure, are not protecting their accounts, or they're not using secure passwords, it really feeds into all that feeds into your threat model. So don't just do it yourself, but tell your friends and everybody to follow these steps. And if they follow these steps, then I guess my hope is that the world will be a more secure place, right? Leave you off with some tips. So hack yourself, right? Talk about the burglar. If I was a burglar, how would I get into my house, right? Same thing, hack yourself. Google for your name. See what comes up, right? See what you can find on Facebook about you. Like go and don't log into Facebook, but go as anonymous and search for what information you find. You'll be surprised. Harden your social media security privacy settings. Use fake names, right? One best ways to be private is to use to have disinformation, right? Use fake names, birth dates. It's really important to have a secret question and answers, right? Some of these questions and answers to reset your password ask you all the same thing. Which city you were born in? What was the name of your of your favorite teacher? All of that information can be found on social media. Most people kind of give away one place or another where they were born or what their favorite teacher is. If it's not them on their social media, it's their friends. They may be a message that says, "Hey, remember that teacher? You really loved him in high school. He was awesome. He was an awesome history teacher. You loved his subject, right?" That gives a quick away, right? Really important to draw a clear line between your private life and your public life, right? And use a password manager. Here's some additional resources we provide in security innovation, and you'll have these in slides after this. So use them, go to them. There's some good stuff in there. And we have some questions. Do we have any questions from the audience? Let's see. Let's see. Is it possible for hackers to access my computer webcam? Yes, it is. Absolutely. Very, very likely that they can access your webcam. Actually, newer laptops have these shutter thing that automatically closes your webcam if you're not using it. But a really, really easy thing to do is to tape your webcam. Right? That's a really easy thing to do. How can I keep my phone safe from hackers? That's a loaded question, right? Really, really, really lots of ways, right? But one of the important things is to keep it updated, right? When your phone says there's an update, update it, right? Don't install software that you are not sure of, right? If you have an Android, for example, if you're installing from the Play Store and it looks shady, doesn't have that many stars, doesn't have that many downloads, don't install it, right? Better safe than sorry. Don't click on messages from people you don't know, right? A very classic thing. That's that. All right. Anything else? Any other questions? All right. So thank you very much for listening. I hope this was useful. I hope that you picked a few tips and tricks to keep your data safe and yourself safe out there. And would be really if everybody follows these tips, I think the world will be much safer place. All right. Thank you so much. And with that, we'll end this webinar.